Right, that's a Commando, believe it or not. It's made up out of rubbish, swap meet rubbish. Typically, when I do these videos for YouTube, I only ever do custom bikes made up out of bits. I have yet to put a matching number bike on, which I have a few, but I'm not going to, because everybody does it. You know, most of the bikes on there are nice matching number bikes, so you've all seen them. Why would you want to see more? But anyway, so yeah, the guards I picked up, the tank, the side covers, they're fiberglass off a 72 model, the first year of the Interstate. But the thing about this is it's an electric start. And the ES happened in 75, 76, some say 77, whatever, a few of the last ones. It came out with a 2-pole, 2-brush Prestolite starter, similarly found on Evinrude outboards, and I think the early Sportsters had the similar starter as well. But it was only 2-pole, 2-brush, so it was always a bit weak. And this one, I've taken the 2-pole, 2-brush, converted it, or had it converted by a handy auto electrician to 4-pole, 4-brush, but I had to supply him with some bodies from Evinrude, which I got from a friend. Was able to rob the 4-pole, in other words 4 windings, because if we look at the original one, you can see it's a bit crappy, but you can see there's only 2 windings in there and 4 cores, or laminated cores. And then these I picked up years ago, probably 15 or so. I kept 2, gave the rest to John Wellings at Wellings Auto Electrics in Ipswich. They're the 4-brush holder. So you replace the brush holder with one of those, you put the windings out of a 4-pole Prestolite, and you've got something that's then double the capability, the torque required to start these things. I'll run through, and the other option of course is to go with something like this, a modified, supplied by a guy, or modified by a guy called Dave Madigan. I think it's pretty close to an over-the-counter type of starter, but it's a new aluminium nose on the front. I've got something similar inside very short, but it's got a bigger gear made into the, as you can see, it's made into the armature, as the original one was. Again, you can see how the gear is made onto the armature. The starter itself has a train of gears, starting with a little gear up in here, which spins, the starter spins, it hits that gear. This is a little back clutch, or to stop a backfire clutch. And then the last of the gears is this large one, that has a nice, what should be a nice smooth edge, and that sprocket rides on the clutch. And then there's, in here is the sprag clutch. They call it a clutch, but it's kind of a weird looking, half bearing looking thing. In other words, it'll only work one way, and when this is together, no, it's not going to go together now. Anyway, what it does is allows the sprocket, the sprocket will spin one way, but it won't spin the other. So that allows the whole thing to spin over and then just free along, you know, free wheel with the engine running. With these sort of things, you can see, or you can hear, when you stop the engine, a real loud clack clack, which is just a bit of sprag noise. It's only with these electric starts. Now back to this bike. When I built it, I used a standard, you may be able to see it in there, I don't know, in the top gearbox bolt. It's slotted. On the other side I've put in some little pieces and a large washer to locate it. the original electric start cradle had just a hole in the top gearbox bolt because it was positioned. That was it. And they could do that because there was a seal in the back, unlike the horrible sliding plate that the normal Norton has, and this hydraulically damped, spring-loaded chain tensioners. They just slide up and down against the chain. So in actual fact they're pushing the chain out like that to tension, which is kind of strange the way to tension, but it seems to work. And in this bike, which is made up out of junk, you may be able to see in there I've pinned the swing arm, 2 little bolts in there. Now the electric start cradle had a couple of cotter pins, not unlike your Triumph and BSA style kickstart cotter pin. It took them 8 years to figure that one out, because with the Norton the pin becomes loose in the cradle, not necessarily the bushes wearing or the pin wearing so much, although it will if water gets in there, but the cradle. So I go in and do this bit of a bodgy pin, which then stops the cradle from slopping around the swing arm in the cradle, which, you know, can be a tad unsettling, but given that Nortons tend to slop about a little bit, they're all on ice elastics, you probably won't notice it that much. Just, you know, if it gets bad enough, your chain might fall off. And that's the 4-pole 4-brush modified stock starter. Now it had a battery failure just recently. The battery was only 2 years old, and that's the dog of a thing over there, 2 years old. So it's got a new one, and they're a 14 amp battery. I'll just fitted a new one. This has spark plugs in it. It's under full compression. Now if I had any fuel in that, it would have started. Okay, but I just had the tank off for another reason. It had it drained and I haven't bothered putting fuel back in it. But it's a good running motorbike, and that starter, when the battery's fresh, and I haven't charged it since it came out of the box, so it probably needs a little bit of a touch up, and it seems to be doing quite well again on the starter. It's been quite a reliable starter off the electric start and or kick. I have a 3-phase alternator in it, and this is a bike that I actually built for my wife, to give her the option, you know, because a Norton can be a bit of a booger to start. You got to have a little bit of weight about you. They've got such a horrible kickstart to handlebar relationship, or you know, if you've got a unit Triumph, see where the Kickstarter is back there on the back end of the gearbox. If you've got a Triumph, the Kickstarter is probably about here, and you're much more up over the starter and your handlebars to give you purchase when you go to start it, whereas this is further back. Now this, a Commando with clip-ons is a bit of a bear, you know. But anyway, so, and they have, this thing will hold me up on compression. It's probably a little bit too much compression, given that I've got the electric start on there, but once it gets rolling it's okay. And it usually fires off really quickly, so it's not that big a problem. I have a Mark II carburetor. It's a 30mm, a bit of a boogered up manifold, some braided lines to the rockers, and it's, like I said before, it's a 3-phase 180-200 watt alternator to keep things running. And when it had the battery failure, a bit of a push off, and, you know, started first roll, you know, first couple of feet, so all off the alternator, and ran off the alternator all the way home, so it was no problem when we did have an issue. Now with Commandos, they got, this has an early model. See that? Well, early-ish. You can see under there the extra hole behind the gearbox bolt. That's for the centre stand, which I never did have one when I built this bike, and it's going to be a pig to put it on. It's best to turn them up on the handlebars like an old push bike when you're a kid, and fit them, because it's a bit of a pig of a thing to fit. The spring is so heavy. But anyway, one day maybe. Now this is so this frame is 72 and on, 71 on actually, because 71 on they went to these types of headlamp ears with the upside down triple trees, you know, the nut on the bottom. That all happened in 71, 68, 69, 70 had a separate stem, the nut on the top, and then a separate clamp on the top clamp went on after that. And they had the little wire brackets and all sorts of stuff. Once it went to 71, right through to the end, they had that sort of thing. That's what makes a 71 and a 72 750 a pretty nice thing, because 72 is the first year of the Interstate. You can build any sort of Norton you want. 3 or 4 models in any case. Normally with stainless guards Nortons. So have a small tank, a high rider tank, a whatever Interstate tank. You got 3 different bikes straight off the bat. You know, just all you got is a bit of painted tank and side cover set, and you're in business for 3 different bikes. Well, a lot of people wouldn't know the difference. Anyway, with the side stands 68, 9 and 70, which is the model that had the central oil tank and not the side oil tank that these later models had. That central oil tank model has the clamp on side stand, and then in 71 they went to this long, well, they were more of a prop stand on the early models, and then they went to these long side stands, which you can see this one's kicked out a bit. It needs work. So typical of these Norton stands, they're rubbish mostly, and they need a bit of attention from time to time. And the pin type, it's not unusual to find them broken off. People starting the bike on the side stand. This thing needs, because it wears with these sides, they've got a steel stop and a steel stand, and it just wears away. So the stand's coming around further and further. I need to get it off, weld it up, and restrict the movement to more of a just past 90 degrees. The bike will stand up a little bit better. So it needs to be back about there. That might roll back. Anyway, see how much further back it goes. It's getting to the point where it's almost ready to go off and spin right around. I need to be a bit careful with it. So it's going up on the bench after this and getting a little bit of maintenance. The early centre stands, the first couple of years, they were mounted on the frame, and they were fairly short stand, but they also had clearance problems. And then after that they went and bolted them onto the cradle from 71 on, where I showed you that hole before, which when they're working well, another 850 I ride a fair bit. I can put it on the centre stand, just sitting on the bike, just put my foot on the stand and heave back while I'm standing up on the bike, and down she goes. Pretty good, so they can work alright. A little bit of an ugly looking feature on this bike is the clamps on the header pipes. They're getting a bit rusty, could probably fix them, but it just stops that coming loose, because the whole exhaust system on Norton is another bit of rubbish. They're just swinging in the breeze for the most part, and they try to put locking pins up here, and locking tabs I mean, and then they did the crossover pipe, which helped a lot, but it reduced the amount of thread in the head. So a good thing, but not such a good thing, sort of. But look, I might sound like I'm knocking the Commandos, but from previous videos you can see I've got like 20 of them. I do like them. They just need a bit of sorting out, a bit of R&D, you know, research and development, that the factory could have done, but no, they leave it up to you. But that's typical of a lot of old British bikes. You, the customer, did the development. But anyway, it's hard to say too much about it. 30 years on, I still love them, still ride them. This bike here has got a drum brake on the back, normally would have a disc, a convoluted gear lever on this side. You might say, what the hell is that ugly bit of rubbish? And you're right, but it converts it, you know, it's just a bit of a rough conversion, because my wife rides other bikes that are right shift, 1 down, 3 up. And as you know, a Commando is 1 up, the GP pattern, if that's what you want to call it. So I just made this bit of garbage here just so that she could ride it as a 1 down bike. But anyway, a bit of an overview on a 850 Norton, non-matching number, and it's not a bad little thing. It's been a good bike for quite a few years so far. Had a few little issues here and there, but mostly it's been pretty good. Can't complain. Bit of a PCV valve in there, quite a good one. Helps create a negative pressure in the engine, and helps with your just keeps your gaskets in order, or supposedly, seems to work. Single seat bike, that's all it needs to be. This tank is one of the early ones. It's got a few little problems, as you can see. Starting to crack a bit around the neck, but the later model tank, the very last of them, was a bit slimmer. It was probably a gallon and a half, US gallon and a half smaller, and it was a lot slimmer. And it's a nice tank, so you get a good interstate look. But and these large tanks, when you fill them up, I've had brackets underneath where your coils mount. I've had them broken off before, and had to stiffen them up and put a better plate in to try and stop it, because the tanks, you know, you're talking what, 8 pound per gallon, and there's 50 pound of fuel on board, you know, so it's a fair bit of weight. So that's why the other tanks are probably more like 40 pound are a better deal, you know. But anyway, there it is, a bit of an overview of what is an electric start bike. Not a matching number one. I've got a matching number one I'm doing up for myself. Just made together, cobbled up, bloody, you know, right hand shift electric start drum brake rear that never was. All for a purpose made. You know, the frame came from one spot, part of the engine came, picked up the rest of the engine. The gearbox is just an early one. The wheel, obviously, I got off a guy who didn't want it for some reason. Yeah, had the seat made up, got a few bases bent, and then made up a seat. Made up the rack on the back, bit ugly. Anyway, it's all just Commando, but it's whatever. And it works. That's the main thing. It works fine, goes nice. And I think I've got a 21 tooth gearbox on it, which is standard on the 750 with 19. Then by the time you got to the 850s, they were carrying a couple of teeth more, so it gives you a reasonably relaxed cruising speed at about 60. Cruising RPM at about 60 mile per hour, that is. And not too bad. Anyway, thanks for watching.